Hey, welcome back. So it's Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon. I'm at my house in my garage, and we're going to be laying out a set of steps today. So one of my friends came over. He wanted me to build him a set of steps. Of course, now I can't go to his site because we're all shut down with the mandates, and there's no construction sites going on or working. But I can build those steps right here. I can give them to him, or he can come over and pick them up. I don't even need to be on the job site to build these steps. So we're going to build a set of steps. This is going to be our stringer that we're going to use right here. We're going to go over the parts. And then after they're done, which is going to be a two-part video, after they're done, he can come over and pick them up, or I can drop them off to him. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to first talk about what the steps are. So I'm going to turn you around and show you my set of steps going into my house right here. So this is my set of steps coming into the house from the garage, and we need to know a couple things. We need to know the total rise. The total rise is the elevation from the finished floor to the finished floor. Once you know your total rise, you need to know your total run. That's the lateral projection of the steps sticking off of the wall. So those are basically your two basic numbers that you have to build a set of steps, total rise and total run. We're going to break those down into the unit rise and the unit run. And then after the steps are built, you're going to make a set of stringers. There's a stringer here, this is a stringer here, this is a stringer here. These stringers carry the weight of the steps. These stringers are connected together with a cleat at the bottom and a cleat at the top that anchors it to the floor and to the wall. And then on the stringer, after this is put together, it's called a carriage. So you have a stair carriage. On the stair carriage, you will apply a riser to the unit rise and a tread to the unit run. Now this set was set up specially for this house, and we had a total rise of whatever it was for this particular setup. Our total rise here is right here. So there's a little bit of math involved. So what we have on this particular project, so we have a total rise of 22¼ inches. So we're going to take that number, we're going to convert that to a fraction. That works out easily, conversion to 22.25 inches. We're going to figure that part out first. Then after we figure out our rise, we're going to go to our total run. So the carriage width, the distance across this entire set of steps, not the treads, the actual stringer to stringer, is going to be 69 inches. That's how wide it needs to be. And we're going to have a 9-inch setback on either side of that. So we're going to take 18 away from 69. We're going to get down to 51 inches. So the carriage that I need to build for him is going to be 51 inches wide. It has to have a total rise from floor to floor of 22¼ inches. So let's figure out how we do that individual rise coming up. So we take the total number of rises, the number of rises that we need. We have to figure that part out first. So you take the total rise, and I'm going to divide that by an arbitrary number of 7. Now, where this number comes from, this number 7, is there's a certain rise-run ratio that you have to have, and for every step, there's a range. And the range it depends on where you live, municipality, what code you're going by, but the range can be anywhere from 6 to 9 inches. 7 inches is a really good rise. I like to be around 7 to 7½ inches for my unit rise. It's really good ergonomic rise for young people and elderly people. It's not too high, it's not too shallow. You can traverse your steps real easy and not fall. But you have to be in that range between 6 and 9 inches. So I picked 7 as my arbitrary number to start with. I take my total rise of 22.25, I divide it by 7, and I get a number of 3.178. Now I can't have 0.178 rises. I can only have a whole number here. So I need to round this down or round this up. So I'm going to round that down. I'm going to round that down to 3 rises. So I've established with this total rise that I'm going to have a unit rise or 3 unit rises. Now I need to figure out how big each one of those rises needs to be. So I take this, go back down here to the unit rise, take the total rise number again, divide it by the number of units that I want to have. So I take 22.25 divided by 3, and I get a unit rise of 7.416 inches. Now, I need to convert this back to a fraction to see what this works out to be. So simply drop the whole number, take your decimal, times your decimal of inches by 16 to get down to the 16th of an inch. You get 6.66 sixteenths, which rounds basically up to 7/16. So our unit rise that we figured out for this particular total rise is going to be 7/16 inches for each step, and I know I need 3 of them. Now that we have that figured out, and we know how much our rise needs to be and how many rises we need to figure out our run. So there's 2 methods for your run, and depends on where you live. And my whole construction career, I've always used method 1, the 17-18 method, but there is another method out there. It's the 24-25 method. I've calculated both of them out to show you that there's not much variation, but there is a little variation in them. So what this method is 17 and 18. That's 17 inches and 18 inches. So the combination of the rise, 1 rise and 1 run has to fall between 17 and 18 inches. So if we take that, we take 17, we know our unit rise, back over here, we know our unit rise is going to be 7 and 7/16. I converted that back to a decimal and I got 7.4375. I take 17 minus that number, I get 5.625. I take 18 minus the number, I get 10.625. So my combination of rise and run has to fall between these two numbers. Now I can make my run whatever I want it to be as long as it comes in between these two numbers here. I can go all the way down to 9.5 to basically 10.5. Method 2 is a 24 to 25 inch rule method. So what this does is it does a combination of rise, run, and rise. And by doing an extra rise, it shallows it out a little bit and you don't have such a steep set of steps. And there's a little bit of variation in the numbers. So you take the 24, you subtract the 7, the rise twice. So you take these, add them up, subtract it from there, you get 9.125. You take 25, you subtract from that, you get 10.125. So you can see that there's a little bit of variation between the two methods. I've always used this method. Either way, you're going to come up with the values that you need to have. I chose as a run cut of 10 inches. Now 10 inches is going to put me in between both of these two methods. I'm going to meet both criteria for my codes and I'm not going to have any problem. And it's going to create an incline angle coming up your steps somewhere between 30 and 38 degrees is the optimal incline angles. So now that we have that, let's go over here to our stringer. And this is what we're going to end up making right here. So I do a little print for you. So we're going to have our stringer. It's going to have a rise of 7 and 7/16. So it's going to have a run cut of 10 inches. Another rise of 7 and 7/16. Another run cut of 10 inches. And then that's going to attach to the structure. The last rise will be right here. We don't need to build 3 rises because our third rise is from the last tread up onto the new platform, just like we have here. We actually have 3 rises here. Rise 1, rise 2, rise 3, but there's only 2 treads. And by doing it this way, I can shallow out my steps and not have them project out so far into the room. I could have made another way. I could have made 3 rises with 3 runs, and this tread would have been flush with this top of these steps up here, but that pushes you out another 10 to 12 inches out into the room. So I like to make them this way. So here we have our board. First thing we're going to do with our board is crown it. Now this is a 2x12 pressure treated. This is going to be an outside set of steps going from the sidewalk up onto a porch. So it has to be treated to be outside in the weather, and it has to be a 2x12 because you'll see when we make the cuts why it needs to be a 2x12. There's certain criteria we have to meet. So the first thing I need to do with my board is crown it. So remember how to crown the board. You look down, you sight down these edges right through here. You sight down these edges, and you're going to look for any projection where the board is not in a straight line. So the crown of this board is going in this direction. So I'm going to mark that crown with a little arrow. So the crown is going this way. Now recall when we do rafters, we want the crown facing away from us, but when we do stairs, it's better to have the crown facing towards you because you want, when this step comes in and we make our cuts, we want the step to stand up like this and the stringer is going to go like this. So we want that rise and that crown facing up. So the next thing I need is my frame square. Need a frame square to do this. So on the frame square, come in here and get on this a little closer. On our frame square, we have our body and we have our tongue of our frame square. This is 2 inches wide, 24 inches long. This is 1.5 inches wide, 16 inches long. And there's a front and back to this square. And if you're not on the right side, you could possibly get your measurements messed up. So the way to know if you're on the front of your square, well, obviously, manufacturer will stamp his name right there. The name will be stamped on the front of the square. This is the face of the square. This is your outside corner, this is your inside corner, this is your body, this is your tongue. This is the face of the square. This is the back side of the square. If there's no manufacturer stamp on there, you can still figure this out. Always hold the big side, the body of the square in your left hand, and it wraps around your body. When it wraps around your body, you're looking at the face of your square. And the reason there's a difference here is because on the front of the square, we're at 1/8 and 1/16 of an inch, but on the back of the square, we're at 1/10 and 1/12 of an inch. And if you use the wrong side of the square, you're going to get your measurements messed up when you try to translate them onto your board. So we've crowned our board. We're going to start right here. Now we know we want to have a run of 10 inches. So I'm going to simply mark 10 inches right here. 10 inches from that heel to that mark. There's 10 inches. And I know I want to have a rise of 7 and 7/16. So all I have to do is line up on there with the crown facing me, 10 inches to there, and then pivot that out till it's 7 and 7/16. So I have 10 inches here, 7 and 7/16 inches here. That is going to be the notch. This is going to be my run. This is going to be my rise. Now, You notice I didn't start on the corner down here. If I start on the corner down here, which some people do, I choose not to, but if you start on the corner down here and you draw your first line, you're basically wasting all of this part of your board, because you're gonna have to cut this back anyway, and you're gonna end up losing this material right here. So there's no reason to start on the end. I shifted up the board enough so that I can create another rise right here and not lose that much of my material when I lay it out. So let's start right here. So I'm gonna start right there. What I wanna have is a right angle turn here, and I want that turn, when it turns right angle, to be at least one rise high. So I'm gonna put that on 10, put this back on 7 7/16. Now normally I'm gonna use a pencil for this, but because we're filming this video, I'm gonna use a Sharpie so you guys can clearly see these lines. But I like a fine line as possible when I make my cut. The codes say that you can have a 3/8 of an inch variation between rise or run. So every rise to rise to rise, from the smallest rise to the largest rise, can have a 3/8 variation. From the smallest run to the largest run can have a 3/8 variation in the cut. I believe that that number is way, way too big. A good carpenter should have a rise-run variation of less than 1/16 of an inch. There is no reason that you should have any variation in these rise and run, because when you walk up and down steps, people get lazy kind of. Their feet only go as high as it needs to go. And if you have too big of a variation in your rise and run, people end up catching their toes on the front of the steps and tripping. So this is going to be rise number 1, tread number 1, rise number 2, and that's all I really need is rise number 2, because I'm only going to go up 3 rises. But I'm going to shift this up to the next line, put it on 10, right where that line intersects, go out to 7 7/16 on the other side, on my body of my square, and I'm going to draw this line right here. I'm not going to draw the whole thing because I'm going to change this around. So I'm going to come back over here, use my square up from this corner right off of that line. Notice I didn't waste any of the board now. I have all this board available to me. And I'm going to come back down here 7 7/16 or 7 7/16, and I'm going to mark that. Now that's where the rise will be, but we have to make a couple allowances. Come up to the top. I'm going to square that off on that corner right there at 10 inches. I'm making sure I'm at 10 inches. I'm going to square that up. And basically, this is going to start to lay out my stringer. So let me show you how the stringer would look. Right here, I'm going to come square this off on my line. So there's my stringer. That's what I really need to cut. And that's what that is right there. So we have a rise, a run, a rise, a run. This will attach to the house right here. The last rise will be from this tread on up. Now, there's going to be a problem when we do this, however, because I need to put a tread on here and a tread on here. And when I put a tread on here, I'm going to change this rise height. So whatever tread material I'm going to use right here, I need to make an account for that and make an allowance at the bottom of this, and I have to make this cut a little bit smaller to account for this tread. When I add a tread to this and I add a tread to this, I change nothing here. By adding this material and adding this material, nothing has changed. I just simply shifted that up. When I add something here, this sits on the ground, I've made a change in my measurement here, and I need to adjust for that change. Now, the board that's going to connect these two together, the cleat that connects these two together, is going to be a 2x6 right here. Use a 2x6. I know a 2x6 is 1.5 inches thick. Just verify that. Make sure that the pressure treat sometimes can be a little bit thicker. It is exactly 1.5 inches thick. So all I have to do is come up here and mark 1.5 inches. Mark 1.5 inches right there at the bottom. I'll take my square, line that up. Scroll that one out, I don't want that one. This is my adjusted bottom cut. By making this shorter, the whole set is going to drop down. When the set drops down, it's going to look funny when you first put it in. But once you put your treads back on there, it's going to come back up another 1.5 inches. This value right here is not going to change. And the top one, so when we first put this in, the bottom is going to be 1.5 inches low and the top's going to be 1.5 inches tall. But once we put our treads on there, everything's going to come back in and you're going to be within a 32nd of an inch as long as you make your cuts. Now it's a simple process of just cutting this out and making 4 more, because we're going to go 51 inches across. So we're going to have to put, I want to put them every 16 inches across there. So we're going to need to make, you can figure out how many we would need at 51 inches across. put the carriage together and then cut the treads, and then he's ready to pick it up or I'm ready to drop it off to him. So I'm not going to show you the cuts. We all know how to use the cuts. How I would cut this though is my circular saw. There's my circular saw right there. I'm going to start this cut. Before I cut this off and cut this off right here, I'm going to make this cut in. I'm going to stop right at that corner right there. I'm not going to project past that point. I'm going to come in here with my circular saw and cut this out. It's going to leave a little wedge and triangle left over here. I'm going to take my Sawzall or my jigsaw or even a handsaw and cut out that rest of that wedge. Then I'm going to cut this off, come around here, cut that off with my circular saw, cut that off with my circular saw. You'll be tempted to trace this to make another one, but that's not a good plan. You shouldn't trace your material. You should actually lay them out every time. Don't use it as a pattern and trace it, because when you trace things, things start to grow and get bigger on you. So take the time to lay them out every time with a square. It's good practice for you anyway. Once all the stringers are cut out, we'll just cut the cleats to our right length. We'll cut our treads to our right length, and we'll simply put that together. And what I'll probably do is I'll cut all my parts, and after all the parts are cut out, we'll come back with video number 2 and show you how they all went together and how the finished product turned out. All right. One other thing, the distance right here can never be less than 4 inches. It has to exceed 4 inches. We cannot have less than 4 inches here. If we have less, right now we're at 5 inches. That's good. If we're less than 4 inches here, there's too much stress on your stairs. And when you're bouncing up and down the steps, these are a really small set, but when you're bouncing up and down the set, you have a tendency this board will want to split in here, and your stairs could fail on you. A couple other things about stairs is stairs can never exceed 12 feet. A run of stairs can never exceed 12 feet. They have to be a minimum of 36 inches wide, and they can never exceed 12 feet. If your stair stringers and your carriage has to go above 12 feet, then what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to put in a platform or landing. There's lots of different types of steps. There's straight runs, there's switchbacks, there's winders, there's spirals, and there's platforms. The platform on any set of steps has to be as equal to the size of the step, so it has to be at least 36 by 36, so people have enough room to move around and transfer around on the steps. Well, that's it for now. I'm going to cut all this out. I got a bit of work to do. Not that much, but a little bit of work to do. And after I get it all cut out, we'll come back with another video and we'll show you how it all came together. Thanks. Bye.